Reunions have a way of making everyone look both older and younger at the same time. That night, the old hotel ballroom smelled faintly of champagne and polished wood, like nothing had changed since senior year, even though 2 decades had gone by. I didn't belong there, not really. I was 22, tagging along as a kind of +1 for my cousin who begged me to come. I thought I'd leave after an hour, maybe grab a late coffee somewhere. That was before I noticed her. She was laughing softly near the bar, one of 3 women who seemed to orbit each other with ease. All in their 40s, polished in a way my generation never quite manages. Deliberate jewelry, the kind of heels that don't wobble. They weren't loud, but the space bent toward them, the way a circle always forms around firelight. I couldn't tell you why I kept watching. Maybe it was the way her hand lingered around the stem of her glass, or how her eyes flicked across the room like she wasn't impressed with much. When her gaze brushed mine, I looked away too fast, pretending to check my phone. Later, in the quieter corner near the coffee station, I found myself standing close enough to hear her order. Black. No sugar. Her voice had that low, steady tone that made simple words sound heavier than they should. The barista handed her the cup, and she stepped aside, brushing her sleeve against mine without apology. She glanced at me then, like I'd been caught staring, which I had. "You're not one of us, are you?" she asked, a half-smile tugging at her mouth. I fumbled. No. Cousin dragged me here. I was promised free drinks." She chuckled once, not loud, but it carried. "At least you're honest. That's rare at reunions." We didn't say much after that, but the silence stretched without snapping. She sipped her coffee, eyes drifting toward the ballroom doors where music pulsed faintly. I found myself folding the paper napkin in my hand, over and over, until it was no bigger than a postage stamp. "Do you even remember anyone in there?" she asked finally. "Not a soul." Her eyes softened, like she was trying not to smile. She nodded once, almost approvingly, and then turned to leave. That should have been it. But 10 minutes later, as I sat scrolling through old messages I'd never sent, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was again, standing with the 2 women I'd seen her with earlier. They were all looking at me like they already knew something I didn't. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "We're stepping out for a bit. Come with us." My throat caught. The ballroom buzzed behind me, but suddenly it felt far away. I didn't move right away. I think I wanted to ask why, or at least what for. But her eyes held mine, steady, patient, waiting. And before I could answer, before I could even decide if I wanted to, she reached for my phone resting on the table, tapped her number in, and handed it back without a word. Her hand brushed mine just long enough to feel intentional. Then she turned, walking away with the others. On the screen, one new message blinked. "Don't overthink. Just follow." I sat there, heart thudding louder than the music, staring at the words that felt like a doorway I wasn't sure I should step through. The hallway outside the ballroom was dim, lined with faded portraits of principals and donors who all looked the same, stiff, smiling, unmovable. She walked just ahead of me, her heels clicking softly, the other 2 women chatting in low tones that never seemed to need me. We ended up in a lounge meant for faculty, the kind of space no one bothers to renovate, worn couches, half-dead plants, a kettle humming on a side table. Someone must have plugged it in earlier, because steam curled up, filling the air with the faint smell of green tea. She glanced at me. "You drink tea?" I nodded, though I rarely did. She poured 2 cups, careful, steady, like she'd done it 1,000 times in silence. She handed me one, her fingers grazing mine. We sat. Not together, exactly, opposite ends of the couch, as if space itself was part of the ritual. The other 2 women had slipped into their own corner, whispering about people I didn't know. She broke the quiet first. "Strange being back here. Feels like yesterday and 100 years ago." I hesitated, then asked, "You were close with everyone?" She shook her head, a small smile that didn't quite last. "Not really. I was the one who slipped home early. Didn't go to prom. Didn't keep in touch." She sipped her tea, eyes fixed on the steam. Funny, right? I show up 25 years later, and suddenly I'm visible again. Something about the way she said it, half laugh, half confession, sank deeper than it should have. I wanted to ask why she came tonight, but I only managed. Well, I saw you. Her gaze flicked up, sharp but softening almost instantly. For a second, I worried I'd said too much. That's kind, she said simply and set her cup down. The silence stretched again, thick with things unsaid. I folded and unfolded the napkin from under my cup until it tore. The risk of it all finally caught up with me, the age in her eyes versus mine, the way her confidence made me feel both older and younger at once. She must have seen the doubt flicker across my face because she leaned back, studying me. You're what, 22? 23? 22. She nodded slowly, like she was tucking the number away. My son's 24. It landed heavier than I expected, that detail. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it made everything sharper, more impossible. She must have noticed my jaw tighten, because her hand brushed against my sleeve, just once, quick, like smoothing out fabric. A small gesture, but it felt like more than reassurance, like she was telling me she knew, and still didn't step away. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. But later, when I lay awake replaying it all, it was that tiny touch that wouldn't let me go. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The lounge had grown quieter, the hum of voices in the ballroom now just a muffled beat through the walls. One of her friends slipped out for a phone call, the other busy scrolling through photos on her screen. It left the two of us in a pocket of stillness. She leaned back, sipping the last of her tea, then set the cup down. Her eyes drifted toward me, not searching, not demanding, just steady enough to make me feel pinned in place. I shifted, picking at a loose thread on the couch. You ever wonder why some people show up to these things? Because they're lonely, she said without hesitation. Then, after a pause, or curious. Or both. Her honesty caught me. I didn't know if she meant herself. I wanted to ask, but the words stuck. The door creaked suddenly, and her friend returned, laughing into her phone. We straightened a little, as if caught doing something we hadn't done. No one noticed, but I felt the shift, that quick scramble back into safe distance. When the noise faded again, she exhaled softly, almost a laugh but not quite. See? Even silence feels suspicious in a place like this. I looked at her then, longer than I should have. She noticed. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something, and didn't. Instead, she glanced at my hand resting on my knee. Her own fingers twitched once, like she'd thought of reaching over. She didn't. I filled the silence clumsily. I should probably head back. My cousins, you don't have to explain. Her voice was calm, but softer now. For a moment I thought I'd stand, let the night reset. But I didn't. I stayed caught in the weight of the air between us. Then, footsteps again, the other friend rejoining, a burst of perfume and chatter. She smiled politely, joining in, but her eyes flicked toward me once, lingering, unreadable. It was nothing. It was everything. I imagined leaning closer, imagined her not pulling away. The thought itself was dangerous, enough to leave me restless. She must have felt it too, because when the conversation dipped, her voice dropped low, meant only for me. Sometimes, the hardest thing is not saying what you mean. My chest tightened. I turned toward her, words forming, half-formed, lost. Her face was inches away, close enough to notice the faintest line near her mouth when she frowned, close enough that if I leaned just slightly, but the friend laughed too loudly, the moment splintering. I swallowed, pulling back an inch. She did too. Neither of us said anything more, but I knew we'd been one breath away from crossing something we couldn't take back. The next time I saw her wasn't in a crowded ballroom, or a half-hidden lounge. It was the morning after, outside the hotel, where the air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. She stood by the curb, waiting for her car, arms folded tight against the early chill. I almost walked past. Almost. Instead, I slowed, blurting the first thing that came. Coffee? She looked at me, eyebrows raised like she couldn't decide if I was brave or foolish. Then she nodded. There's a place around the corner. 10 minutes. We ended up on a wooden bench outside that cafe, paper cups warming our hands. It wasn't romantic. Traffic buzzing, pigeons circling, some kid crying 2 tables away. But it was the first time we'd been just us. She tapped her cup lightly, staring down the street. You know this is ridiculous. I know. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. You're too young. I'm too. She trailed off, shaking her head. To what? She didn't answer right away. She just took a long sip, eyes fixed on anything but me. Finally. Too used to losing control. The honesty startled me. I gripped my cup tighter, wishing I had the right words. I don't think you've lost anything. Not with me. She turned then, quick, sharp, as if testing whether I meant it. For a moment I thought she'd laugh, brush it off. Instead, her voice dropped. Do you know how dangerous that sounds? I swallowed. Probably. Silence. A car horn blared, a bus hissed to a stop. Her fingers drummed once against the cup, then stilled. My son! She began, then stopped. She let the unfinished thought hang heavy between us. I felt the weight of it anyway. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. I just leaned back, staring at the gray sky, words slipping out before I could catch them. I keep thinking this should end before it starts. And then I see you again, Anne. I broke off. Anne? She pressed, so quietly I almost missed it. I looked at her then, really looked. The way her hair caught the weak sunlight, the way her eyes held mine too steadily. I wanted to tell her everything, to confess how restless I felt without her, how the thought of her leaving unsettled me in ways I couldn't explain. Instead, the words hovered at the back of my throat, unfinished. She shifted slightly closer, close enough that our sleeves brushed. She didn't move away. For a long moment, neither of us breathed. Then she whispered, not looking at me. What are we doing? The question hung there, trembling in the space between us, the one thing neither of us could answer. After the bench, I thought something had shifted, not forward, not backward, but closer to something neither of us had named. But a week passed. Then another. No texts. No coffee. No chance encounters. I told myself not to notice. But I kept checking anyway, glancing at my phone before bed, scrolling through her name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the screen more times than I'll admit. Nothing. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't planned. Grocery store, middle of the week, fluorescent lights making everything look pale. She was at the end of the aisle, comparing 2 jars of pasta sauce like the choice mattered more than it did. She saw me. Paused. Then smiled, polite, restrained, nothing like before. Hey, I said, trying to make my voice casual. Hi. Just that. A word flat. I wanted to ask where she'd been. Why she hadn't called. But her body language told me not to, one hand on the cart handle, the other holding the jar too tight, like she needed something to grip. How've you been? I tried. Busy, she said quickly, setting the jar down. Work. Family. You know. Family. The word landed heavy. Before I could press, someone came around the corner, a man, maybe late 40s, holding a set of keys and looking straight at her cart. He smiled at her, familiar. She smiled back, different than the one she'd given me. Ready? He asked. She nodded. Almost. She didn't introduce us. Didn't explain. Just turned back to the shelf, suddenly absorbed in labels. I muttered something, I don't even remember what, and stepped away. My chest felt tight, not broken, just suspended. That night, I drafted a message. I don't know what this is, but I can't stop thinking about you. I typed it out, read it twice, then deleted it. I drafted another. Do you want me to leave you alone? Deleted that too. In the end, I left the screen blank, just staring at the little cursor blinking like it had more patience than I did. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next day, I walked past the cafe where we'd sat. I almost went in, half expecting to see her at the window. The seat was empty. I didn't go inside. It was late when I finally saw her again. Not at a reunion, not in a store, just outside her house, porch light on, her car parked crooked in the drive. I hadn't meant to be there. I'd walked past on my way home, and stopped without deciding to. She opened the door before I could knock. Maybe she'd heard my steps. Maybe she was waiting. For a moment neither of us spoke. She stood there in a loose sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. Tired but real in a way I hadn't seen before. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice low. "I know." Silence. The hum of a street lamp. Somewhere, a dog barked. I shifted on my feet. I keep not saying things. And then I go home and regret it. I don't know if this is a mistake. I just know I can't keep pretending I don't. I stopped. The word I almost said lodged in my throat. Her eyes softened, but her arms stayed crossed. "You think I haven't been doing the same?" That startled me. She sighed, leaning against the frame. "I pulled back because it scared me. Because it's not fair. To you. To me. To what I'm supposed to be holding together." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, though she covered it quickly. "I don't care if it's fair," I said before I could stop myself. She shook her head, almost smiling. "That's because you're 22. You'll care later." I wanted to argue. Instead, I stepped forward, closing the gap just enough that I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her breath hitched once. "I'm not asking for forever," I said quietly. "Just for you not to disappear." She stared at me, and I thought she might close the door. Instead, she reached out, not for my hand, but for my sleeve, fingertips barely catching the fabric, like she was testing how close she could allow herself. We stood like that, both of us suspended in the quiet. The choice hung there, unspoken but heavy, risk or retreat. Finally, she let out a shaky laugh. "God, you make this hard." "Then don't make it harder," I whispered. Her hand stayed there, holding on to the smallest part of me. She looked down, then up again, and for once, didn't hide what was in her eyes. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "Neither do I." A long pause. Then, almost too soft to hear, she said, "Okay." She didn't move closer. Neither did I. But in that single word, in the way her hand didn't let go, something shifted. Not a promise. Not an ending. Just a fragile truth neither of us could deny anymore. Months passed. Not all at once, but in slow, ordinary rhythms: morning light, the sound of rain on windows, groceries carried in from the car. Somewhere in that stretch of time, we found a way to stay. It wasn't a decision. No announcement. Just small things, steady things. Sometimes we'd meet at the cafe on the corner, the one with the shaky benches out front. She always ordered black coffee. I learned to drink tea, green, no sugar, and though I never admitted it, I only liked it because it reminded me of the lounge that first night. Other times I'd walk her home after work. The street lamps hummed overhead, and the quiet between us felt less like hesitation now, more like comfort. She still caught herself pulling back sometimes, arms folded, eyes turning away as if afraid of being seen too clearly. And I still hesitated too, afraid of saying too much. But then she'd glance at me, just once, and the wall would soften. There was one morning, 8:47 a.m., exactly, when we sat on that same wooden bench, waiting for her car. She had her coffee, I had mine. The traffic buzzed around us, pigeons circled overhead, and she leaned her shoulder into mine without a word. It felt like the kind of moment no one else would notice. But I did. And I think she did too. Life wasn't transformed. She still worked late. I still scrolled through unsent drafts some nights, words I'd never send. But the difference was, I didn't feel paused anymore. She let me in. Slowly, carefully, piece by piece. And I stayed. Looking back, I don't think we ever had one defining choice. We just kept showing up, in small ways. A shared cup. A quiet laugh. A hand brushing against mine that didn't pull away. Maybe that's all love is, when you strip away the noise, not grand gestures, not declarations. Just someone remembering how you take your coffee. Someone willing to sit in silence with you until the world settles down again. The other night, we sat on her porch steps, late, the sky washed with stars. She passed me her mug, black coffee, still too bitter for me, and I took a sip anyway. She laughed softly, shaking her head. And in that moment I thought, this is ours. The tea, the bench, the unsent messages, the questions left unfinished. All the pauses, finally filled. No one else would understand. But we did. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?